episode of, well, I'm think I'm going to call it the DFM podcast, just for short for Dean Fagan Music.
Nice.
Yeah, very original. This episode is with Christopher Siu, who's a orchestrator and composer. I've followed his YouTube channel for a while. I really like his work, so I thought I'd get him on and just have a general chat about composition and orchestration, and hopefully anyone that's listening can learn a bit, as hopefully I learn a bit as the conversation goes on. So you want to introduce yourself first, I suppose, Chris, just any background on yourself, how you got started?
For sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, Dean. I appreciate it. So I started playing piano at age 5, and I think I just really wanted to play an instrument. And growing up, I was trained classically, but I always had a love for video games, especially the Mario stuff. I think every kid has some experience with Nintendo. So they came up with their Super Mario Galaxy series, and then recently they had their Super Mario Odyssey series. And what stood out to me about those scores is that they are primarily symphonic and orchestral in nature, and those are kind of the soundtracks I listened to growing up. And so growing into high school, I started songwriting, and I was kind of doing piano, vocal, and guitar type of stuff, but I was using Ableton at the time, and it came with some built-in strings. And, they didn't sound realistic at all, but at least it gave some kind of padding and stuff like that to give it some texture. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, that's not too bad. And then when I heard about Logic, I was like, wow, Logic actually contains, orchestral instruments. So I downloaded it, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. It sounded pretty realistic to me, not nothing like overly real, but it served its purpose really well. And I used it for a little while. And then in, I think it was 2017, might introduce me to Contact, and he's like, yeah, dude, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there now that you can listen to. So the first thing I heard about was the Symphony series from Native Instruments, actually, and I heard some of the demos. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then I listened to, I believe next I encountered, maybe it was Cinesamples or Orchestral Tools or something, and I was like, wow, this is really realistic. I would love to get my hands on some of this stuff. So that was kind of when my journey into this sample library and composing stuff began. And my first video was I think it was November or December of 2017. And so from then on, I've been able to kind of upload at least once a week, stay relatively consistent, and try to just help as much as possible in between making my own music and, putting stuff together. So it's been a lot of fun, but I think especially during this time of COVID-19, it's just more important than ever to find out what people really want and really need, and just try to for them. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man. Yeah, for sure.
Well, no, I think your channel has been it was helpful to me. I'm sure it's helpful to a lot of others, and you've grown a nice sort of following on it, in fairness, over this amount of time. Like you mentioned there, actually, that you're classically trained. So I actually didn't have this question actually written down, but since I am actually classically trained as well, I might as well bring this question up because it gets brought up a lot. Do you find that classical training has actually helped your composing?
Yeah, so especially for piano, I would say the classical training gave me a foundation that helps a lot with getting the ideas down. And because when you play pieces by Chopin, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, all this stuff, it really expands your ears, and it really trains you to listen critically to other stuff,
Yeah.
And so in addition to your training and technical aspects of piano playing down, I also had a lot of theory classes. So while I absolutely was bored out of my mind in history classes and I fell asleep, the harmony and counterpoint and analysis classes, where I was always very interested in those, because I was like, wow, I can actually write music in this, and I didn't know at the time I actually wanted to write music, but in those classes I was like, wow, I can actually express what I think might sound good on these pieces of paper, and maybe I'll try to impress the examiner or the markers who are looking at these papers, that kind of stuff. So I would say it's definitely helped. And ever since I graduated from university, I'm not formally trained anymore, so I have to basically listen and study for myself. And that's been very helpful to just kind of sit down with a score and kind of analyze what's going on. So
yeah, like one way I think it really helps, to where I'm not classically trained on piano, I can play I know I mean very small bits for compositional
Mm,
purposes, just to get things down. I'm classically trained on woodwind instruments, so clarinet,
right.
bass clarinet, saxophone and stuff. But I
Very cool.
think a lot for orchestration, I think, is where it really helps, because I find nowadays loads of people can compose, and I know a lot of amazing composers that are not classically trained the slightest.
Yes.
One that would come to mind would be Alex McCalla.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not like massive YouTube channel as well, not classically trained, but an amazing composer, amazing
Mm-hmm.
ear as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when it comes to where people eventually sort of fall down a bit, if they actually get the chance to write for live players and they're going to have something performed, and they don't have some sort of they don't even have to have full classical university training or anything like that, but just even studying the sort of classical forms of music, I think kind of lets
Right.
them down, because they don't understand, one, how to notate correctly, so they have to maybe hire an arranger or an
Mm-hmm.
orchestrator to actually notate, and then the actual ranges and playability of certain things, because samples can do amazing things, and sometimes players can't do what the samples are going to do for you,
Right.
and they
Right.
don't actually realize that. So I think, like, from my background, from actually playing in orchestras over the years,
Yes.
that's really helped me. I think that's sort of where it lets people down if they aren't classically trained a certain bit nowadays.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And like it just all comes back to listening, right? Like finding the pieces that you just really enjoy and listening to them. And if you can get your hands on a score, it can only help, of course. So it's definitely a good idea to just break things down as much as possible. And if you can take some sort of analysis class and actually figure out how to harmonically analyze, melodically, and orchestrationally see what the instruments are doing. Like you were saying, that some of the amateur mistakes, that pop up. I think one of them is not giving breath marks to
Oh
instruments.
yeah.
And
Now,
'cause
look, if you play piano, you don't have to worry about that. You can breathe as
yeah,
much as you want. But a woodwind player or a
exactly.
brass player might die halfway through the performance.
Exactly. So and also like sustained long notes are actually harder than people think, I think, especially for the brass players, I was watching some videos with Mike Patties and on Cinesamples, and he was interviewing a trumpet player, and he was saying that yeah, high notes are surprisingly difficult to sustain over a long period of time, just because the
Hmm.
embouchure is so important and the amount of air needed, right? So it's just uh, all these things we need to be careful of when listening to like hybrid or trailer music. It's not all entirely realistic. So
Yeah, I think that's kind of the main genre where it really stands out. Now, granted, you get away with it in that genre though, because you're kind of expected to in anyways, because a lot of it is hybrid and it's specifically set that way. But when
right.
it comes to actually live performing those pieces, that's when, yeah, it can kind of sort of get in the way a little bit when they eventually get recorded.
Right, exactly.
One thing I did actually want to ask you, because you do a lot of great orchestral mock-ups, and you go a lot in detail on your channel about them. What would you suggest, to look at to actually learn virtual orchestration, and two, either what you consider the best, or yeah, probably what you would consider the best sample libraries for creating a really realistic mock-up?
Yeah. So the first question, you were saying a good resource to learn about orchestration,
Mhm.
is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I mean, there's a few books that I could definitely recommend. So Rimsky-Korsakov is a very famous composer. He wrote a
I
book on
have that.
orchestration. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then Samuel Adler also has one as well. Uh, and if you're into jazz at all, actually, whoever's listening, there's a really good book by Semi Nestico called The Complete Arranger, I'm pretty sure.
I think
So
I was
that
told
one
that a while
is
ago, and I
more,
never got it in the end. But
yeah. It has some pretty cool stuff in it. So it kind of has some overlap with the classical world, which I would definitely recommend too. Uh, but reading is kind of, it can be a tedious task for a lot of people,
mm,
and sometimes we just don't have the attention for it.
I know for me
Um,
it is. Like, I'd rather
right.
watch a video or something. Like,
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
reading sometimes just gets in the way.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of like online courses and stuff, there are quite a few out there that you can choose from. Um, and so let me think of a couple. So there's cinematic composing. You probably
Hmm.
see their ads everywhere. But the first course they ever came out with was symphonic virtual orchestration, I think it's called. I personally have that one. It's a pretty good overview about the basics of what you need, and the teaching is quite quick, so you might want to consider that if you're looking at sales page. Mike Verda, as we know, has quite a few longer master classes. He goes hours into those. It's more casual, but you can definitely learn a lot from there.
He does some amazing sales on them, though. When the sales come around, you can pick up a lot of them.
Yes, absolutely. And another one that comes to mind is Score Club. So Alain is the teacher there. So he basically goes to a whiteboard approach, and he basically writes down everything he's talking about. But I would say he is the most classical of all of them. So he really goes into the very fundamentals of music theory, takes you behind the scenes of many scores, and talks about everything from quite a theoretical approach. And then after that, he has a few orchestration courses, 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is obviously kind of the more basic one, but the third one is more focused on textures and lines and runs and things like that, which is pretty cool. I haven't gotten a chance to check all of those out, but I'm always learning from other resources. And if you're not in the position to purchase any courses, you don't really need to at the moment, because
with YouTube and how big it's grown, there's so much out there as well, free stuff.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there and some composers are offering their MIDI stuff as well for download to follow along, which is really helpful. And I just think you can find pretty much everything you want from watching YouTube nowadays. So Orchestration Online is a good channel. Inside the Score is a good channel. I'm blanking on a few others, but this is basically like, there's no better time to kind of learn about it. And just whatever you search on Google, whatever you search on YouTube, you can probably find it. Mm-hmm. So for number 2, it really depends on how in depth we're trying to go, because if we're just starting out and we're looking for something that's an all-in-one, and you're not quite sure, if this is something you really want to venture into, then an all-in-one solution might be a good idea. So something like, everyone says Albion 1, that's a good starter package, because it's pre-orchestrated and everything. Berlin Inspire from Orchestral Tools is also good, except it doesn't have all the solo instruments, and I don't think it has every single complete section as well. But what it does have, it's a very, very nice sound, and it's quite affordable. So it's taken from their larger Berlin series. Cinesamples has their Cine Symphony Lite, which is entirely ensembles, and I think it's $400. And what else? So Project Sam has their Orchestral Essentials. So you have a whole wide choice out there. And actually, Project Sam also has their free orchestra now.
I was going to mention that, Like some nowadays, like, it's ridiculous. I done a video probably around the start of my channel, I think. So I don't know, over 2 years ago, is to do with sample libraries, and I think I did one on all free ones, or I just did a bonus at the end about free ones, because there wasn't as many at the time. But now there's like so many top, like all the Spitfire Lab ones could be nearly used in a track, and all of the Project Sam free ones could be used in an actual full track at this point.
Absolutely.
There's so many free libraries out there at this point. It's ridiculous. Like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and what's even better is that Projects have made their free orchestra now available for Contact Player. So they pay the Native Instruments fee, and is available to you on the player, which is free for you. So it's a win for you, absolutely, if you're just starting out and you're looking for an orchestra. So for more dedicated stuff, though, you might want to look into. It depends on your budget, of course, but I think on the lower end, definitely take a look at East West Composer Cloud if you're just dedicated. You really want to get into it, and you want full libraries to give you all the detail you really need to start out without investing too heavily in them, and you can always unsubscribe when you don't want to work with them anymore.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, do you still consider, like, I actually got East West to Composer Cloud for my first sort of step in as well, and would you still consider them sort of a good range to start with? I suppose sound wise, I think it just depends on how good you know how to use the samples, I suppose, to get the best sound out of them.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, some sound better out of box than others, which that's sort of a question a lot of people ask with East West nowadays, because of how old it is. Does it still sound as good out of box? But the one thing I will say about the Composer Cloud is that because you get literally every library that they've ever basically released from it, their ethnic stuff and some of their drum libraries are actually still, I find, really up to scratch. I think it's Storm Drum 2 and 3, and then one or two of the ethnic sort of libraries. They're really good, but the strings and some of the brass I found a bit iffy at times to sort of play with straight out of the box in any ways. And some of them can be severely CPU and like RAM heavy as well.
Yeah, so I personally actually have never used the Hollywood stuff, or actually any East-West stuff for that matter, except for the Hollywood pop brass, which I bought last year. But yeah, so but my recommendation is just based on affordability at this point. For
affordability, getting started.
Yes, but I've definitely heard that it takes some tweaking and some work to get them sounding really good, because I have heard some mock-ups that are unbelievable using the Hollywood series. So I would definitely say it's possible, but it does require a little bit of extra tweaking there. But some that do offer a really nice sound out of the box are obviously Spitfire and Berlin. I would say Orchestral Tools and Spitfire are definitely some of the top guys for that. And Cinesamples for me is another big one, because I use their stuff all the time, so I'm pretty familiar with that series. And I would say, also Cinematic Studio stuff is very good as well. So we're just waiting for their woodwinds and percussion. Hopefully that comes out sometime soon. But yeah, everyone's excited for that.
I think everyone's waiting for. But again, they're obviously at the top end price range. Even for me, it stopped me getting a lot of libraries, because price range on some libraries can be a bit outrageous at times if you don't have money for.
Yeah. I mean that.
But obviously, keep an eye out for sales. Sales are probably the best time to pick them up if you can.
Right, Black Friday, for example. Yeah. So I think Berlin Strings is actually Orchestral Tools' most expensive product. It's like, I think it's 800 something euros. So for me, that's like about 1,200-1,300 Canadian dollars, which is about 3 Cinematic Studio libraries. So
it's a bit. It can be a bit outrageous at times.
But it speaks for itself. And I mean, as long as developers are willing to update and keep things fresh, then sometimes it's worth the price tags, and especially if there's sales going on. So
And I was going to mention, you mentioned growing up, do you listen to the Nintendo scores? I was a gamer growing up, but I didn't really. I still am now, but I didn't really listen to scores as much growing up. I was just too heavily involved in the games. It wasn't until I actually probably turned around 15 that I really started listening to film scores properly. It probably would have been Lord of the Rings actually first as well. That really like caught my ears and wanted me to actually compose music. But has your influences changed over the years, or have they kind of, from the start you know what you liked and you've kind of just worked along with that, or suddenly at one point just something else really caught your ear and then brought you down a different sort of line of listening to stuff?
Ooh, well, I grew up with a lot of classic Disney movies like Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and those things. So I always credit Alan Menken for a lot of my influences, and kind of in the musical theater genre and Broadway style. And I think to that day, that still influences my writing, especially for songwriting. It influences that a lot. In terms of instrumental orchestral music, I would say it's still rooted quite a bit in the Nintendo stuff, and maybe some of the, like the stuff you hear in Disney amusement parks, like just like the cheerful, uplifting stuff. That always
just
made
the real
me happy
lush, the lush orchestration.
Like beautiful chords and just modulations, transitions, all that stuff it just comes together to make a really out of body experience that you can't really describe. So for me, those two sources have always been something I've been a fan of. And also growing up, I listened to a lot of Michael Bublé. So his style is very jazzy and big bandy and swingy. So I did my Christmas medley last year with just using a mock-up for the big band. I used a lot of big band music as an inspiration. I think some of that kind of bleeds into other styles that I write, but generally I would say those are kind of my 3 main sources. And of course, I'm when new scores come out, it's always fun to listen to those as well. But yeah, generally those are kind of the big ones for me.
Yeah, so anything that's mentioned there already. One thing actually, if I would ask you on that point, because you mentioned some of the big band stuff, do you have actually a specific library that you like for big band? Because I find that's kind of a library that I find a lot of people asking about online, that they kind of struggle to find actually captures that sound properly.
Right.
I think there's one out there that is it is it Broadway Big Band or something like that?
Yeah. So
I heard a
there's
few people
Broadway
mention
Big
that.
Band. Yeah. So that library specifically from Fable. I think that was really the first dedicated big band library on the market, and their asking price as a result, was really up there. I think it's at the time of this recording, it's still probably $2,000-$3,000 for the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh.
So when I saw it, I was like, yeah, it sounds nice, but it's probably out of my range, out of most people's ranges. So.
I'd say out of most people's range, not yours. Okay.
Yeah. And so but they also have their gig like their gigging library, which is pulled from that, and also their they basically have two smaller versions at two smaller price points as well. So one is specifically meant for live gigs, and one is for just a stripped down version of that main library. But I don't have experience with any of those actually. The libraries I end up using. So here, let me talk about Project Sam for a second. So after Broadway came out, I was still in university. I think it was maybe second year. I think that's when the first Swing came out, and that was when I first started hearing about sample libraries. So I was like, Swing, oh, that's pretty cool. I like Boobly. Let me check this out. And then I watched the trailer. I was like, this is amazing. So I immediately went on my wish list, and then I think it was 2016 or something, maybe, when the Swing More trailer came out, and that was more dedicated to big band, and that was really, really cool as well. So I invested in those, and the upside is that those are pre-orchestrated already, so you can get a really cool sound out of the box, and it's very stylized in a certain time period. So if you're looking for kind of an old-timey sound, that's definitely really good, I would say, right? And then 2018, end of 2018, that's when Orchestral Tools came up with their big band library. So days, and that's the primary library I use in my mockup. So they actually gave you every single instrument multi-sampled very deeply, and with a bunch of mutes as well. So speaking about that, I think Impact Soundworks had their straight ahead jazz horn library as well, which was also all the horns multi-sampled, but it didn't go in as much detail, and the sound was a little more dry, slightly more synthetic, so it just wasn't as realistic from my perspective. But when I looked at Glory Days, I was like, yeah, this is definitely the thing that's going to get me more into jazz music, and it really has. So I've been studying more scores and just listening to more music and thinking, is it possible to really turn these samples into something that's believable? So it's always a never-ending quest. But
I find it's a hard genre to capture realism out of, because like you mentioned Swing and Swing More, they're the actual two that I use as well. So I was wondering if you were going to mention them. They're the two that I use, and I do find them pretty good. Like I did a rescore a while back on my channel of an Incredible Scene, and because in the style of Michael Giacchino, I've used both of them. And I think it sounds pretty convincing towards the style of the movie.
Right.
And I think it's Swing More that's more dedicated towards
the
saxes and a bit of solo instruments and stuff, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And that's I've never tried Glory Days, but that's what I was going to ask you. Do they have a solo saxophone in that?
They do.
They do.
They do. Yeah.
Struggle to get saxophone sounding correctly.
Yeah, it's very true. Actually, I was listening to the saxes a lot, and Glory Days comes with all their individual saxes, and so they have the legato patches. They have adaptive legato, so right, and then also they have a dedicated expressive legato patch, which is really, really cool for slower playing, and I think it sounds pretty convincing to me anyway. But yeah, the whole thing is just pretty convincing to my ears, especially if you listen to the trailer. Some people said the solo part didn't sound that realistic, so, and I totally get it. I think it's
hard to capture though.
It really is, yeah.
Solo parts in any genre, not just even in like jazz, or even if it's just a solo cello and solo violin, anything. If you need a lot of work into MIDI to sort of capture them really realistic. But I find that with brass libraries, a really like a standout solo trumpet or like a solo saxophone or something, they're just hard to make real to an extent.
Yes, there's so much nuance to it. And so about that, actually, because Orchestral Tools is going over to the Sun player, you might see Glory Days on the sign soon, so you might be able to purchase the sax individually if you want to try it out. And
Okay, yeah.
yeah, you can get all the articulations just for one saxophone and give it a go and see how you think it is. And I think I personally think it's pretty cool. So I think the library is pretty strong. I think out of all the instruments, I think the trombones are actually the weakest. I think there's a few more variations in the trombones that just weren't really captured. Like for example, the slides, they didn't really do slides for trombones, I think, very well, very much.
Okay.
So those ones are, I would love to see in an update, just like sliding from one note to another, or getting the growls in there, all that stuff.
Yeah,
Would be really cool to see. But yeah.
Okay, one other thing, and then if anything else comes up after, we'll keep going. But one thing I did want to ask you was finding projects after you left university, or you might have been working on projects in university. I'm not fully sure. That's usually when people start to, without like pursuing composition, they start to look for projects either final year university or after it. Did you find it difficult, or where did you sort of first go, and then have you built up a network to keep them coming in, or everything in general, really?
Yeah. So actually, my major in university was piano performance in classical music. So that actually had nothing to do with composition at all. And it was really the end of 2017. So I think it was my third year that I was already teaching piano at that point. But I was like, I would love to earn an income doing orchestration or like arranging, doing mock-ups for people. I think that would be really cool. And so that was one of my reasonings for starting a YouTube channel, actually, was to have a place to host my music online, somewhere aside from SoundCloud, because I'd heard about the audio quality not being as good on SoundCloud.
Yeah, it sort of drops a good bit, yeah.
Right, and especially on Facebook video too, it kind of degrades it, right? So, yeah, I put it on YouTube, and it sounded pretty good to me. So I was like, yeah, I mean, if I can have a place that doesn't degrade my audio and I can keep it there, and it's basically evergreen content, I can just keep it online for forever, then it's a good choice. And then that's when I started joining Facebook groups as well. So virtual orchestration, of course, film scoring, applied, and all these other groups with all these musicians and composers in there. And also I joined a group called Make Pop Music. So it's a group dedicated specifically to making pop music. So I introduced myself as kind of a string arranger and someone who does orchestral music. And as the group was relatively new at the time, so I kind of stood out as someone who was doing something a bit different. And that's where I got a lot of my first clients in, like a lot of songwriters looking for extra strings on the top and things like that. So I started off pretty much in there, and that's how I kind of established myself as someone different. And then over time, more people working in the orchestral field or writing cinematic music started appearing in the group, and then they started reaching out to me because at that time I had already kind of established my case. And so then they started hiring me to do more stuff on their projects, which went publicly on Facebook in general. So I posted on my general page, and then more musicians found me on there, and then so it kind of just built up a little by little. So at this point, I work with clients, a few clients a month, and it's turning out pretty well. I think I get to work on what I enjoy doing, but
that's the main thing.
I think, yeah, exactly, it's the main thing, and it's important that you maintain that good relationship with your clients. Of course, like if you can over deliver in a certain way, it's definitely a good idea to do so. Give them more than they expect, and just do a solid job and get it done in time as well. So very important.
I suppose I will ask you, since loads of people say don't do it, but then people are saying, but if I don't do it, will I actually get a job? And you're saying starting off that you're getting a few arranging gigs and stuff. Did you do a few for free to get going? Because that's always a hot topic in all Facebook groups for composers and everything, to build a CV, build a portfolio. But people are saying, well, don't take the free jobs. But then other people also think, well, if I don't take them, I'm never going to be able to compete and actually get going in the first place. So
yeah, fair enough. You know what? The reason people do free work is because they don't have a portfolio yet. And so if you already have something to present to show what you can do, you really have no need and no reason to do free work. Because if people can hear your quality and if they want that quality, then people will be willing to pay for it. So in my case, I didn't do any free string arranging when I started out because I had already uploaded stuff on my YouTube channel, some original pieces, showing
for you.
my orchestration stuff. So, people came to me and they asked me if I could do something for them for X amount or whatever. But very rarely did people come and ask me if I could do it for free. I mean, I did have people asking at time. I think I did a few of those when I was starting. At this point, there's more to keep me busy, so I kind of focus on just the main paid stuff and the clients who really want to invest in a good ending product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I understand. As I find it. I'm not sure if it's growing now, but every post, even if I see if I'm in a film producers group or a game designer group looking for projects, different things like
Yes.
that. So much as whether it's music, whether it's graphics, whether it's anything, it's just always unpaid, 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 and you're just
Yeah.
like, how can you break this wall?
Yeah, it's tough, man. Like, yeah, I mean, musicians have to respect developers and developers have to respect musicians because you can't really have one work very well without the other, to be honest. So
Mm-hmm.
I think a portfolio and just having content online nowadays is more important than ever if you want to
Yeah.
get work. So for me, I mean, uploading on YouTube serves dual purpose, if not more. But number one,
Mm-hmm.
it helps people who are looking for these resources. And number two, having that portfolio on there enables me to show someone something if they ever look for it. So
Yeah.
it's all evergreen content. It just stays online and it basically works for you to draw people to you.
Yeah. And one thing I actually want to go back to, because as I said, I'm not classically trained in piano, but I love classical piano music. And if you're saying you've majored in, you must be at a very good level of classical piano to major in the end.
Thank
What
you.
what did you play for your final recital? I want to know. And two, what would
Ooh.
you say would be your favorite classical pieces then to play?
Oh, yes. Okay, so yeah, it's been a while since I've played, but the very last piece I played at my final recital was Kapustin's Concert Etudes, Opus 40. So I really love that piece because Kapustin is a Russian composer, but he basically combined classical and jazz influences in his pieces. So the first piece is basically a very, very uplifting, very fun piece of music that sounds quite jazzy, but of course it's all notated. So it's a lot of fun to play if you're just kind of, if you're an advanced pianist and you just want to check something out that's different, I would definitely check that out. I would say my favorite composers are definitely Chopin and Beethoven, of course. I played one of his, I think it was the 30th sonata, or was it 28th? Or something like one of the later ones, one of the more romantic ones, which is really difficult, by the way, playing classical music romantically. It's difficult. And then Chopin, I think third year I played a barcarolle, and the final year I played can't quite remember, but yeah, just throughout my years, I just played. I think I also played a Ravel piece. More based on like water and stuff. That was a lot of fun playing impressionistic music aside from classical and romantic music. Yes.
I do find romantics, or personally for me, I find late romantic in particular, the most, even in orchestral music, actually probably the most entertaining and fun to listen. For me, it's so big and just energetic compared to, like, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy the classical period and even the Baroque periods if I have to listen to it, but composed like Liszt and late Chopin and Mahler or Bruckner or anything like that for symphonies, anything late romantic, anything just huge, just always blows me away when it comes to classical music. Also makes me second guess ever becoming a composer. But
yes, no, for sure, man. It's like I would say the late romantic period is kind of like the pinnacle of classical romantic music. Like music was still developing up until then, and then late romanticism was kind of where everything just it really peaked, I think. And then ever since then, like now we have 20th century music, lots of atonality, lots of serialism, lots of stuff that follows formulas, and it's not as entertaining personally. It's more of a math and calculated thing than music to enjoy.
Yeah, I'd ask what would be your opinion on that? Because in my university degree, a lot of it was more contemporary classical based, whether it be Schoenberg. Actually, I don't mind too much. Schoenberg has a lot of decent music.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's more the real serial stuff, and when they start using sort of spectral music and so like some of the extra contemporary stuff, I
Right.
don't really enjoy as much because I don't find actually a lot of context behind it sometimes.
Mm,
I find it's music to say it's music to an extent.
sure.
Um, what would be your opinion on some of the more like broader contemporary stuff that was looked at? And was your course the same? Was there a lot of focus on contemporary composing and contemporary art music?
Right. Yeah, yeah. We had a couple classes on uh on that type of stuff. And I remember when we were doing units on tone rows and serialism and Schoenberg and stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of fun to write and say like, oh, this is the formula this guy was using. Oh, this is contrary motion because of these numbers and things like that. But
Yeah,
listening, I would never listen to it a second
listen to
time.
it that way. Yeah, exactly. But like
So
I genuinely remember writing certain pieces of music for some assignments, and I I knew that the lecturer would probably analyze it this way and maybe see it this way, but I'm physically not. I'm just writing because I know he's got to actually pick it out this way and analyze it as if it's contemporary art music. When I'm just
right,
I wasn't trying to get full enjoyment out of writing and saying that I actually enjoy this piece. It's more just make it complex to be complex to an extent, and
right.
that was it really.
Yeah, it's like a lot of composers flexing.
Yeah, that's kind of
That's
what it
really
was.
it. Yeah,
And
yeah, for sure.
but it's heavily. I find it heavily taught in universities nowadays, like the contemporary side of art music, more than the previous periods before. Really.
It's true. Like especially in Toronto where I am, the concerts are praising and championing a lot of modern music, like contemporary music, and not a lot of attention is being focused on more of the neo-romantic or just romantic music in general. Classical music is still thriving. You have the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and you have places that will definitely showcase a lot of works. Even Baroque music, there's a dedicated company that puts on shows for that. But for generally romantic music, we don't see that too much anymore, and it's kind of a shame, you know.
That would be kind of the opposite over here in Dublin, Ireland. Our concert hall, we'd only have one actual national symphony orchestra here,
Uh-huh.
but they would tend to, for most big concerts, at least have one big symphony or big sort of early romantic to late romantic, because over here it tends to bring the most people in to actually
Right.
see the concert would. So over here it's not too bad. Again, there would be a lot of contemporary music though, a
Yeah.
lot of 20th, 21st century dotted around the place, probably still more than the actual periods before it. But for the
Right.
big concerts, at least they would put on sort of more looked for symphonies or bigger works to actually attract people to the concerts.
Sure. For sure. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay,
Makes
last
sense.
thing I wanted to say before I let you go, but your YouTube channel, balancing, if someone wants to actually start up a YouTube channel
Yes.
dedicated towards anything music related, balancing it with projects or real life or anything, how do you find that, and any tips you'd give towards actually balancing it?
Sorry, you said balancing or bouncing?
Yeah, balancing. So
Bouncing.
no, balancing the like working the workload of the channel and actually just getting up videos around your general life and how
Oh, I see. I see. I see. Yeah. 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 So I guess this time period,
it wouldn't be as,
especially.
as bad, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much more extra time now.
Mm.
So usually, at least like last year and 2017, I was dedicated to putting up a video a week, and at times it was definitely hard because as a full-time piano teacher, you don't have that much extra time.
Hmm.
You have stuff during the day and you have projects and stuff. But aside from that, it's sometimes it's hard to find time to put to extracurricular things. And YouTube at that point for me was, I was still finding my footing. I was still trying to make a name for myself, and I still am. But
Hmm.
for me, it was more of a routine, and I was trying to stick to it, and I was able to, but it was difficult. So I would say if you have a full-time job and if you're working and you're always really busy, just trying to carve out a certain day, a certain time regularly that you can commit to content, whether that's uploading a piece of original music, because if you're a composer, it's always a good idea to write something every week. So even putting that online can be a good idea. If you're trying to share educational content, then yeah, carve out some time for that and put something together and then put it out. Just make sure it's valuable to somebody, because if it's not valuable, then there's no point of doing it.
Yeah.
There has to be a draw to it, right?
Yeah, that's kind of my idea behind this, because for I think the past nearly a month, I just haven't got the time to upload recently. Well, not even that, it's just I haven't really had the motivation at times, and it's kind of let my channel down. But I want to keep it going, because the music business videos I've been making, I've actually been doing decent, and I find a lot of composers actually don't understand a lot of the business side of things. So a few of them actually are finding them quite useful, and I'm keeping them quite short. So they're I need to get them going. So maybe once of them a week, and then I'm hoping to even upload one podcast a week as well with anyone I can. So I think that will keep just a bit of activity when hopefully, as you said, hopefully people find it actually engaging and interesting, because that's kind of the main thing of making the content at the end of the day, really.
Right, absolutely, yes, yeah, and specifically during this time when we have more extra time, if you're originally uploading maybe once a week, try for twice a week. If you're doing twice a week, try for 3 times a week. Just whatever more you can do to show up in people's lives, I think is always a good idea, specifically during this time when people are on media so much more. It just makes sense. So that's a good segue into one of the resources I watch almost every day. If you guys are aware of the Recording Revolution, so his channel, Graham Cochrane, he basically teaches musicians how to record and mix their own music. And I get a lot of mixing questions nowadays, especially for orchestral music, and I always the stuff I teach them is stuff I've learned from Graham Cochrane. And it's funny because the stuff he teaches is specifically he works with rock and some pop music, and it's none of his stuff is orchestral at all, but he teaches principles, and those apply to generally to everything. Doesn't matter what genre you're working on. And the reason I bring him up is that he actually opened another channel recently, specifically dedicated to online business. And as a business owner and an entrepreneur, he's basically figured out the way to make passive income online. And with so many people struggling to find work and make money right now, his channel is a very good resource. So his name's Graham Cochrane. Just search him up, C-O-C-H, R-A-N-E. That's his last name. You'll find both of his channels, and he uploads every week. He does a podcast as well, so it's very useful.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think on that point we'll probably wrap it up. Do you want to say any projects you have coming up, or where people can find you? I'll leave links in the end of this video, and anyways, but you can mention them yourself.
Yeah. Cool. So if you don't know me on YouTube, just search for my name, Christopher Siu. When you see the Asian kid with glasses smiling weirdly, you'll find me. And then on Facebook, just search for my name, same picture. Those are the 2 places I'm the most active. I don't really use Twitter too much. I am on Instagram, so I can't search on my name, you'll find me. Actually, I think on Instagram my name is Chris Yu Musical, so that's my name on there. But aside from that, one more thing. I for each of my videos that I upload now, I'm trying to also create a dedicated step-by-step guide to follow it as well. So I have a few more videos coming up, especially on mixing and string arranging and things like that. In the description of every video, you'll see a free guide to go along with it. So if this is something you're interested in, we don't have a lot of time to read nowadays. But if you're interested in following along with any of my stuff, feel free to download the guide and just follow along. I think it's super helpful. And I've actually had some people tell me they print out the guide and put it on their wall, when they're working on their projects, just to follow along and have like a step-by-step guide to follow. So always having a visual aspect and also a reading aspect, I think combining those can be very powerful. So if you stumble across any of my videos and you see the link in the description, just click on it and it'll take you to the guide, and you can download it for free and just follow along with it as you're working. So
sounds good.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, well, that'll wrap up this episode. I'm hoping to get, as I said, 1 day out a week, so hopefully this will go up at some point this week, and I'll have another one next week. So as Chris said, go ahead, check out his channel. I'll leave the links in the description, and anyways, and I'll see you on the next video.